What's up, everybody? It's Bobby, and today we're here to discuss our final thoughts on the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. Now, we did a previous video a couple weeks ago that got a lot of buzz from a lot of you. And if you haven't seen that, it's called 72 Hours with the S10 Plus. We'll put a link in our description below. And it's great to see a lot of passion from you out there. I mean, we love that you love tech as much as we do. And a lot of you thought that I was being quite negative about the S10 Plus, which I don't know where you got that from, but I thought it'd be best if I address some of those comments from the previous video and then talk to you about our final thoughts on the phone and what it's been like to use over the last couple weeks. So here we go with our final review of the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. Now, a lot of you had some very opinionated comments about what I thought because you thought I was talking bad about the phone, and I wasn't. Now, I did have some questions in terms of the design of the phone. I did feel that it was designed a little bit too safely. It looked like the Note 9, which a lot of you said it didn't. Well, I brought a Note 9 to compare with that. I did have some issues about the color, the prism green here, and those thoughts are still relevant as of today, even after 2 weeks later. And there was a lot of talk on YouTube about this reader because myself included and a lot of other reviewers were actually using it wrong. We were pressing on the screen for it to recognize our finger and unlock the phone, because that's what we're used to doing with optical readers out there from other manufacturers. Someone came out with the video and said, no, all you need to do is just tap on the screen. Don't even have to press, just tap, and it will unlock the phone much easier. And they are right. However, I will say this, it doesn't always recognize your fingerprint the first time out. For me, I have to do it a couple different takes on it to get it working right. Now, Samsung has released firmware updates to fix that, and they did say they are going to release future firmware updates to improve the functionality of the ultrasonic fingerprint reader, but it's not 100% there. Overall, there's so many great things about this phone, and I think a lot of you misinterpreted that because I had some issues with the design in terms of its similarity to previous phones and color. So I just want to get that out of the way, that this was not a negative review then, and it won't be a negative review now. But I am going to be non-biased, and this review is not sponsored by Samsung in any way. So these are my thoughts and my thoughts only. All right, let's recap some of the specs here. First and foremost, this is a 6.4-inch dynamic AMOLED display, 19:9 aspect ratio. So it's much more longer than wider. Internally, we have the Exynos 9820 octa-core 64-bit processor. It's an 8 nanometer instead of the 7 nanometer. 8 gigabytes of RAM, 128 gigabytes of onboard storage, which is expandable as large as you want to go because Samsung allows you with the micro SD card slot. Of course, if you get the ceramic versions, you can get 512 with 8 gigabytes of RAM, but if you go to 1 terabyte of storage, you can now get 12 gigabytes of RAM in a phone. Also, you have a 4100 milliamp battery inside of this, reverse wireless charging 2.0 on this as well, headphone jack. This is the first phone that is certified HDR10 Plus on the display. So if you're watching, let's say, Netflix content that is HDR10 Plus, you are going to have a beautiful visual experience with it. Arguably one of the best displays on any smartphone on the market currently out there. Samsung has hit a home run on it. On the S10 Plus, you have 3 cameras on the back of it, wide angle, you have your standard focal length, and of course your zoom. And then of course you have 2 cameras in the front. One is basically for depth sensing, the other one is for your selfie camera on that. So you are covered optically on this phone for pretty much any scenario you want to shoot in. Okay, so let's talk about the positives that I have experienced over the past couple weeks with this. First, the display. It is beautiful. Every reviewer has said this, and I will repeat what they're saying. It is stunningly beautiful, super crisp, super sharp, and Samsung has tweaked the colors a little bit more. So while you do have that vivid high saturation mode, if you go to normal mode, it actually tones it down and it makes it much more usable if you want to edit photos or look at photography or video content. I prefer that, so I actually brought it down to the normal viewing. One UI is a big enhancement. I love it much more than TouchWiz. TouchWiz was great, has a lot of functionality to it, but I feel that One UI is just more usable. I'm not a big fan of the design of the icons, but that's my personal preference. You can change those icons. A lot of you told me that in the comments from the previous video. I know that. I'm just talking what's out of the box because a lot of users don't go and change a lot of these things. They just stick with what Samsung gives them. What else do I like about this? The cameras. Samsung has done a great job with these cameras. In previous phones, from the S9, the Note 9, and other versions besides that, I always felt like they were a little bit overexposed. There was too much noise reduction going on. They just felt like there's too much software getting in the way of making these images look as good as they can. And I think Samsung has heard that feedback from a lot of us out there, and they've reduced that. The images look much more natural, much better high dynamic range to the images as well. The selfie camera has improved greatly. The DxO Mark testings out there. Look at it for yourself. It's one of the best selfie cameras I have used on any phone. Just really good images out of the selfie camera. So Samsung, thank you so much for doing that. On the back end of it, it's got that wide angle lens, which wide angle is now becoming the in vogue thing in a lot of smartphones out there, and they did a great job with it as well. And you can actually correct some of that distortion within the settings, but you can keep it if you like, if you want the artistic look to your images. The live focus mode works relatively well. It's not perfect. Sometimes it captures certain things better than others, but comparable to what's on the market as of today. Now, you know there's a variable aperture in this camera. There's a f1.5 and f2.4, and it's a mechanical aperture. Now, in previous phones of Samsung's that had this, you really couldn't tell much of the difference in terms of depth of field or usage when you would go back and forth in Pro mode. But in this phone, I can tell a discernible difference. So when you go to f1.5, the background blurs out a little bit more. It does work a little bit better in low light. And with f2.4, it doesn't have as much shallow depth of field to it. So they've improved that a little bit, which I'm glad they have, because that actually gives you more reason to like having a mechanical aperture in the phone. Another cool feature I like about it, and this is more of a visual feature, is the way that they embrace the notch. You know, some people like try to hide the notch as much as possible, but Samsung isn't. And a couple of the ways you'll see it happening is that when you go into the selfie camera, actually there's like a little white line that just sort of flickers around the camera itself. And then if you want to do, let's say, a selfie timer, actually the timer will be a white sort of like ticking clock that goes around the camera. And then when it's fully white, that's when it takes the shot. So it's actually quite cool. And I think it's just a great way to implement that notch into the whole system and make it part of the UI versus trying to hide it. What else do I like? Wireless charging is fast, man. It's great. I mean, Samsung has always, to me, been a leader in wireless charging on phones. And with this faster charging 2.0 technology they have into it, I mean, I'm not really missing the wired charging aspect of it. It works great. Reverse wireless charging, it's fun for the accessories like the watch and like the buds, but I wouldn't use it to charge another phone. I mean, honestly, it's more for accessories than it is for another phone, but you know, if you want to do it, go for it. But now let's get to some of the things I'm not a big fan of. Now, as I mentioned before, there is curved glass on the front and back of it. Now, this is a design language that Samsung has been used in a number of phones, going on from the S7 Edge all the way up to today. I personally am a little bit over the curved edges, and I'll tell you why. While we don't have any black border virtually around this phone except for the top and bottom of it, these curved edges aren't really usable. If you want to highlight text on the side or tap on something, you can't. It's kind of a pain to do it because your finger's slipping off. If you want to edit a photo and you want to use your finger to edit and it's near the edge of the display, you really can't do it there. Also, I find that I get a lot of phantom presses when picking up the phone and holding it because everybody's hand size is different. I have slightly larger hands than maybe some others do, and probably smaller hands than other people out there. But I feel that when I'm grabbing it, it's I'm getting this vibration feedback. I'm like, what's going on? And it's just me touching the edge of the display. So maybe there's something that Samsung could add into the phone to negate that. Maybe some software to say, like, you know, desensitize the edges. But as it is right now, it is a little bit of an issue for me. But overall, I prefer to have a flatter display, especially when it's this narrow and this long, because I want all that screen real estate to be used. So those are my thoughts on that. Now, another thing I'm not really a fan of, it's not to say I'm not a fan of, but I wish they would improve. When using the fingerprint reader underneath the screen, when the screen is off, you kind of don't know where to put your finger at. There's no visual cue or, let's say, like a pulsating fingerprint to say, okay, this is where you tap. It's you sort of have to guess. And while muscle memory takes over, the more times you use the phone, the more times you do it, it still would be nice if Samsung did put some sort of visual cue for you so you know, oh, I tap right here and it unlocks the phone. Overall, I feel like it's something they could improve on the fingerprint reader as a whole, especially for new users out there. Now, Samsung has also introduced a lot of AI elements into this. Computational photography is big, and it is in this phone. Now, one of the things that they're touting with AI is a night mode that they have, okay? Now, we're seeing other manufacturers do this as well, but I have to say that I'm a little disappointed in how Samsung implements the night mode. First off, there's no dedicated button for it, so you basically just shoot at night and then AI takes over. But it's not really that big of a difference from taking a standard photo. I felt like, yeah, it could be better, okay? Those are really my only issues with the camera. I think Samsung's come a long way with it, and I'm really happy with it. I think that's really about it, honestly. I mean, yeah, the icon design's a little bit cartoonish for me, but as I mentioned before, you can change that. It's a solid phone. There's really not much you can fault the S10 Plus for. But there is a question I have about the S10 Plus after using it for a couple weeks, and I thought to myself, I'd ask you guys this as well. With the Note series coming out in a few months' time, and the Note series is relatively the same size, maybe slightly larger, you have S Pen functionality to it, and you could say that Samsung improves on the tech that they put in the S series, they put a little bit better tech in the Note series. Is it worth Samsung to have a Plus version of this phone when you have the Note coming out in a few months' time? Is it better that the S series just have, let's say, the 6.1 inch variant and maybe the smaller S10e variant, and then leave the larger size to the Note? I don't know. What are your thoughts? Anyway, those are my thoughts on the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. Leave me your comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook. Until the next one, take care.